Hi, I'm Alyssa, 32 years old, a single mom who never imagined her own family would turn against her. If someone had told me that the people who raised me would one day stand by while my child was hurt, I would have laughed in disbelief. Family was supposed to protect you. At least, that's what I kept telling myself for years. It was a bright summer morning in Yellowstone, the kind where sunlight filters through tall pine trees and everything smells like fresh earth and freedom. Our family reunion had been planned for months. Cabins by the river, shared meals, laughter around a fire pit. On paper, it sounded perfect. A chance to reconnect. A chance, I foolishly hoped, for healing. My 7-year-old daughter, Lily, sat beside me at a long wooden breakfast table set near the riverbank. Her legs swung happily beneath the bench as she hummed to herself. Then she started singing softly, her voice light and innocent. Musical note: twinkle, twinkle, little star. Musical note: it wasn't loud. It wasn't disruptive. It was the sound of a child feeling safe enough to be herself. Or so I thought. Across the table, my brother Ryan stiffened. I noticed it instantly, the tight jaw, the narrowing eyes. I'd seen that look my entire childhood. It was the same expression he used right before lashing out, confident that someone else would clean up the mess. Lily's singing continued, her small fingers tapping the table in rhythm. I smiled at her, encouraging her joy, unaware that we were seconds away from a moment that would fracture our family forever. Ryan slammed his plate down. The sharp clatter cut through the morning calm. "Can you shut up already?" he snapped, standing so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the ground. "Your singing is giving me a headache." The table fell silent. Lily froze mid-note. Her eyes flew to mine, wide and confused, searching for reassurance. I opened my mouth to speak, to calm the situation, to protect her, but Ryan didn't wait. In one swift, violent motion, he leaned across the table and slapped my daughter across the face. The sound cracked through the air like a gunshot. Lily stumbled backward, collapsing onto the bench as tears exploded from her eyes. Her tiny hand flew to her cheek as she began to sob, her body shaking in pure shock. "Like mother, like daughter," Ryan sneered. "Both useless." Time stopped. I couldn't breathe. My brain refused to process what my eyes had just witnessed. I lunged forward, pulling Lily into my arms, her small body trembling violently against my chest. Her cheek was already turning red, the clear imprint of his hand blooming on her skin. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out. I looked around the table, desperate, begging silently, for someone to step in. My mother, Margaret, sat at the far end of the table. Slowly, deliberately, a smirk curled across her lips. Not shock. Not concern. Approval. My father, Thomas, stared down at his plate, pushing his food around with his fork as if nothing had happened. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He didn't even look at Lily. Silence. Complicity. Across from me, Ryan stood there smugly, his chest rising with controlled breaths, as if he had just disciplined a misbehaving pet rather than assaulted a child. The other adults shifted uncomfortably. My sister Veronica whispered something to her husband. The kids stared, frozen in horror. And then I noticed something that changed everything. A few feet away, standing near the fireplace area, was Mark, my sister-in-law's brother. He was holding a camera. A professional one. A small microphone clipped to his shirt. The red light was on. He had been filming. Every word. Every sound. Every second. Mark's eyes met mine. Just for a moment. His expression didn't change, but he gave the slightest nod. I have it all. That realization hit me harder than the slap itself. This wasn't just a family moment gone wrong. This wasn't something they could deny, twist, or bury like they always had. This time, there was proof. Still holding Lily tightly, I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm, dangerously calm. "We are leaving," I said. No one stopped us. Margaret didn't protest. Thomas didn't apologize. Ryan didn't even look guilty. As I carried Lily away from that table, her sobs muffled against my shoulder, something inside me broke, and something else solidified. All my life, I had been the scapegoat. The disappointment. The one expected to stay quiet to keep the peace. I had endured favoritism, humiliation, emotional neglect. But this crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. As we packed our bags and drove away from the cabin, Lily sat silently in the back seat, clutching her stuffed animal. No singing. No questions. Just emptiness. I glanced at her through the rearview mirror, my chest aching with a pain I didn't know how to name. I had promised her once, on the day she was born, that I would never let her feel the way I did growing up. And now, that promise was being tested. That morning in Yellowstone wasn't just the worst day of my life. It was the day I decided that silence was no longer an option. And that decision would destroy my brother's world. To understand how my brother Ryan could raise his hand on a child and feel justified doing it, you have to understand how we were raised. Abuse doesn't always start with fists. Sometimes it begins quietly, with favoritism, silence, and permission disguised as love. We grew up in a middle-class suburb in Oregon, the kind of neighborhood where lawns were trimmed every Sunday, and appearances mattered more than truth. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Inside, roles were assigned early, and once assigned, they never changed. My father, Thomas, ran a small tech consulting firm. He believed intelligence, ambition, and control were the highest virtues a person could have. My mother, Margaret, managed the household with a pleasant smile that hid her sharp calculations. Together, they created a family system that revolved around one person. Ryan. From the moment he was old enough to speak, Ryan was treated like a project destined for greatness. Every success, no matter how small, was celebrated like a milestone. Every failure was reframed as potential. When Ryan was 10, he once messed up a math equation. I remember watching from the hallway as Thomas sat beside him at the kitchen table, his voice gentle and encouraging. "That's okay, son," he said. "Mistakes are how leaders learn. Let's solve it together. You're going to run a company one day." Ryan soaked it in, pride glowing in his eyes. But when I asked a question, any question, things were different. Why did we have to eat dinner at exactly 6? Why couldn't I join an art club instead of math tutoring? Thomas's face would harden instantly. "Don't talk back," he'd snap. "Go to your room." Curiosity, I learned, was a flaw when it came from me, but a strength when it came from Ryan. Margaret enforced the imbalance with surgical precision. If Ryan swore during dinner, excited about a soccer game, she'd laugh lightly. "Boys will be boys," she'd say. "Just watch your language next time." No punishment. No lecture. But if I repeated the same word, maybe something I'd heard at school, her eyes would narrow like knives. "That's unacceptable," she'd say sharply. "Young lady, go wash your mouth out and think about your manners." I apologized for things that weren't wrong. For existing too loudly. For taking up space. Margaret claimed she was keeping peace in the household. But what she was really doing was protecting Ryan from consequences, while teaching me that silence was survival. As we grew older, the gap widened. Ryan excelled in math and sports, exactly what my parents valued most. Thomas spent evenings coaching him, enrolling him in advanced programs and tech camps. He talked endlessly about how Ryan would one day inherit the business, take it further, build something impressive. I got hammer-down books and polite indifference. By middle school, the hierarchy was unshakable. Ryan joined the debate team and brought home trophies. Thomas framed them and hung them in the living room like museum artifacts. "Look what our boy achieved," he'd boast to visitors. When I auditioned for the school play and landed a small role, Margaret dismissed it immediately. "Focus on your studies instead of pretending," she said, as if creativity were a childish delusion. At a neighborhood barbecue, Ryan and his friends roughhoused and broke a neighbor's fence. Thomas laughed it off and offered to fix it himself. But when I spilled paint during an art project, Margaret made me scrub the floor alone while lecturing me about responsibility. Message received: Ryan could break things. I had to clean them. High school cemented our paths. Ryan floated through life on scholarships, praise, and unwavering support. His future was planned and funded. Thomas poured money into his tech hobbies, building computers, coding software, dreaming aloud about CEOs and empires. I learned how to disappear. I stayed quiet at dinner while Ryan's stories dominated the table. When I tried to share something, Thomas would wave me off. "Not now," he'd say. Ryan was talking. Margaret might pat my hand later, whispering, "You just need to try harder, dear." Those words hollowed me out. By 16, I had an escape plan: college far away. Somewhere I could breathe without constantly being measured and found lacking. Leaving felt like survival. College was the first place I felt seen. No labels. No golden child. No scapegoat. That's where I met Evan, quiet, attentive, kind. He listened when I spoke. He didn't correct me. He didn't compare me to anyone. At 21, I married him, not just out of love, but out of desperation to never go back. When Lily was born, everything changed. Holding her tiny hand in the hospital, I made a silent vow: I will never let you feel invisible. I will never let anyone hurt you and call it discipline. For a while, life was gentle. Then Evan cheated. Then came the divorce. Then reality crashed in. I became a single mom with full custody and barely enough financial support to survive. Exhaustion replaced hope. Fear replaced dreams. And eventually, I did the one thing I swore I never would. I asked my parents for help. Thomas wired money, but not without judgment. "You picked the wrong man," he said coldly. Margaret's voice dripped with pity. "You're pretty but naive. How will you manage alone?" Nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Ryan's life soared. His tech startup gained attention. Investors lined up. He married Vanessa, a sharp, polished woman who fit perfectly into my parents' vision of success. Family dinners became unbearable. They praised Ryan's achievements while dismissing my struggles. Compared our lives openly. Made suggestions, always about what I should do better. Ryan smirked through it all, enjoying the contrast. By the time Margaret invited us to Yellowstone, the roles were already written. I just didn't realize my daughter was about to inherit mine. And that realization, watching Lily cry in my arms after Ryan's slap, made one thing painfully clear: this wasn't just about a bad moment. This was a pattern. And patterns don't stop on their own. I used to believe that once I escaped my childhood home, the worst part of my life was behind me. College felt like freedom. Marriage felt like safety. Motherhood felt like purpose. I didn't know yet that survival can follow you, even when you think you've outrun it. Evan and I started small. A one-bedroom apartment, second-hand furniture, late-night dinners on the couch. He worked as a junior accountant. I juggled part-time jobs while finishing my degree. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. When Lily was born, weighing just over 7 pounds, everything slowed down. I held her tiny hand in the hospital, her fingers curling around mine like she already trusted me completely. "I'll never let anyone hurt you," I whispered. Evan kissed my forehead. "I'll take care of both of you," he promised. For a while, I believed him. The early years were gentle. Lily's laughter filled our apartment. She sang to herself while playing with toys, always making up little melodies. Watching her grow felt like healing pieces of myself I didn't know were broken. But cracks have a way of showing. When Lily was 3, Evan started coming home later. He blamed work, deadlines, office stress. I wanted to believe him, because believing felt safer than questioning. Then one night, after Lily was asleep, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A message lit up the screen. From a coworker named Rachel. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't innocent. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I confronted him immediately. He didn't deny it. He didn't confess either. "It's nothing," he muttered, staring at the floor. "You're overthinking. We tried counseling. Or at least, I did." Evan sat through sessions with vague apologies and no accountability. He never fully admitted the affair, never fully ended it either. By the time Lily turned 4, I understood something painful, but necessary. Staying would teach my daughter the wrong lesson. I filed for divorce. I got full custody, but the financial support barely covered daycare. A few $100s a month. Not enough to breathe. Not enough to rest. I became a single mom overnight. Life didn't slow down, it sped up. I found work as an office assistant. The pay was decent, but stretched thin. Rent, groceries, daycare, unexpected expenses, like the water heater breaking or my car refusing to start, kept me awake at night. There was no safety net. Eventually, desperation pushed me to do something that felt like failure. I called my parents. Thomas helped, but only just enough, and never without a reminder that I was the problem. "You picked the wrong guy," he said, as if betrayal was a personal flaw. Margaret's pity felt sharper than cruelty. "You're too trusting," she sighed. "Pretty, but naive. How will you manage alone?" Their help came with conditions. With lectures. With reminders that I'd never quite measure up. And once again, I swallowed my pride. Meanwhile, Ryan's life looked like it was pulled straight from a success magazine. His tech startup was gaining traction. Investors showed interest. His app was trending in industry circles. He married Vanessa, a confident, stylish marketing executive who fit seamlessly into my parents' fantasy. Family dinners became showcases of Ryan's achievements. "He's a natural leader," Thomas would say, chest puffed with pride. Margaret gushed about Vanessa's wardrobe, her career, their downtown condo. I sat there, smiling politely, while my struggles were treated like inconvenient footnotes. Once, I mentioned I might need to delay a utility bill. Margaret sighed dramatically. "Alyssa, you really need to plan better." Ryan smirked, silent but satisfied, as if my life existed only to highlight his success. The contrast hurt more than I wanted to admit. Ryan and Vanessa hosted cocktail parties for tech insiders. I begged mechanics for payment plans on a used sedan. Half my paycheck went to daycare. I skipped meals so Lily could take dance classes. My parents never missed a chance to compare. At a cousin's wedding, Thomas pulled me aside. "Why can't you step up like Ryan?" he asked. "He's making the family proud." As if raising a child alone meant nothing. Margaret later suggested I find a better job, instead of leaning on them again. Their words echoed the same message I'd heard my entire life: "You are a disappointment." But Lily kept me going. Every night, no matter how exhausted I was, I read her bedtime stories. I tucked her in with a smile, even when I felt like I was breaking apart. She deserved a mother who didn't give up. Still, the pressure built. The judgment. The comparisons. The constant reminder that I didn't belong in my own family. When Margaret called that summer, inviting us to Yellowstone, my first instinct was to say no. 2 weeks in close quarters with Ryan, my parents, and their unspoken hierarchy sounded unbearable. But Lily overheard the call. "Mom, can we go?" she asked, eyes lighting up. "I've never seen hot springs before. Or my cousins." Her excitement softened me. I told myself maybe things would be different. Maybe time had changed them. Maybe they'd see how strong I'd become. I packed our bags and drove 8 hours to Wyoming with cautious hope and low expectations. Lily chatted the whole way, pointing out mountains and clouds shaped like animals. I didn't know yet that this trip wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning. And the cost would be far higher than I ever imagined. The drive to Yellowstone took 8 long hours. Miles of open road, mountains rising in the distance, and my daughter's excitement filling the car. Lily pressed her face to the window, counting pine trees and asking 100 questions about bears and hot springs. I smiled when she smiled. That's what mothers do, even when their stomachs are tight with dread. We arrived in the late afternoon. The cabin sat along a rushing river, rustic wood structures surrounded by towering trees. From the outside, it looked like the perfect place for a family to reconnect. Cars already lined the gravel lot. The first person I saw was Ryan. He stepped out of his sleek SUV wearing designer sunglasses, his posture relaxed, confident. Vanessa followed, effortlessly polished, like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. My parents were already on the porch. Thomas waved briefly when he saw us. "Alyssa. Good? You made it," he said. No hug. No warmth. His attention immediately shifted back to Ryan, clapping him on the shoulder and asking about a new investor. Margaret leaned in for an air kiss, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "You look tired," she said lightly. "Long drive?" It wasn't concern. It was a reminder. I forced a smile and led Lily inside to drop our bags. Our assigned room was smaller than the others, a narrow space overlooking the trees, with just enough room to move. Outside, the kids gathered near the riverbank. Veronica and her husband's boys, ages 8 and 10, were tossing rocks. Lily ran over, eager and hopeful. "Hi. I'm Lily. Want to skip stones?" she asked brightly. The boys barely looked at her. "We already have teams," one muttered. A girl Lily's age whispered something to them. They laughed and moved farther down the river, leaving Lily standing alone, her shoulders slowly sinking. I watched from the porch, my chest tightening. This was how it started. Inside, Ryan dominated the kitchen conversation, waving his phone around. "This app update just landed us a 7-figure client," he bragged. Vanessa smiled proudly. "We might need to expand the condo," she added. Thomas beamed. "That's my boy. Building an empire." Margaret squeezed Ryan's arm, glowing. I tried to mention Lily's school project, a small achievement she was proud of. Margaret talked over me. Veronica listened politely. Others drifted away. I unpacked snacks and stayed quiet, the familiar invisibility settling in. That's when I noticed Mark. He was setting up professional camera equipment near the fireplace. Tripods. Lighting. A microphone clipped neatly to his shirt. I walked over, lowering my voice. "Are you filming everything?" I asked. Mark adjusted the mic, his expression neutral but knowing. "Your dad wants the whole legacy captured," he said. "Everything." The word lingered. A chill ran through me. Mark wasn't naive. He had married into this family years ago. He'd seen the sharp words, the subtle cruelty, the way problems were ignored as long as appearances stayed intact. This wasn't just vacation footage. This was evidence, whether anyone realized it or not. Dinner that night confirmed my unease. A long oak table. Candles. Plates passed down the line. Ryan spoke. Everyone listened. Margaret served him first. Always. When Lily mentioned wanting to visit the hot springs tomorrow, Margaret cut her off. "Let the adults talk, sweetie." Someone snickered. Lily's face fell. I squeezed her hand under the table, my jaw tight. Later, by the fire pit, conversations split into small groups. Tech deals. Promotions. Sales quotas. Ryan sketched app ideas on a napkin for Thomas, who watched with pride. Lily sat alone, carefully roasting a marshmallow. Mark filmed quietly from the shadows. Every smirk. Every dismissal. Every imbalance. All on record. That night, I tucked Lily into bed. "Why didn't they play with me?" she whispered. I brushed her hair back, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Sometimes people don't know how to be kind," I said. "But you're wonderful just as you are." She nodded, but her eyes looked uncertain. As I lay awake later, listening to the river outside, a familiar feeling returned. I'd been here before. Watching myself be erased. Watching others be elevated. Told to stay quiet for the sake of peace. Only this time, it wasn't me alone. It was my child. The next morning, we gathered for breakfast by the river. Plates clinked. Coffee poured. The air was crisp and calm. Lily sat beside me, swinging her legs, humming softly to herself. Musical note twinkle, twinkle, little star. Musical note, I smiled. Across the table, Ryan's jaw tightened. And something inside me whispered a warning I didn't hear in time. The morning air by the river was cold and clean, the kind that usually clears your head. Sunlight glinted off the water, birds calling softly from the trees. Plates of pancakes, eggs, and fruit were passed around the long wooden table. From the outside, it looked like a peaceful family breakfast. But tension was already there. Lily sat beside me, her feet swinging, her voice soft but cheerful as she hummed. Musical note twinkle, twinkle, little star. Musical note, she wasn't loud. She wasn't bothering anyone. She was just being 7. I smiled at her, grateful for that small spark of happiness after the awkward night before. Across the table, Ryan stiffened. I noticed the way his fork paused midair. The way his jaw clenched, muscles tightening. He shot Lily a sharp look, irritation flashing across his face. Margaret raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Thomas kept eating, eyes fixed on his plate. Lily's singing grew a little louder, her fingers tapping lightly on the table in rhythm. She caught my eye and smiled, as if sharing a secret. Ryan exhaled sharply. He muttered something under his breath. I couldn't hear it, but the hostility was unmistakable. Then, without warning, he slammed his plate down. The clatter echoed over the river, cutting Lily's song short. Enough, Ryan snapped, standing so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the wood. Shut up already. Your singing's giving me a headache. The table went silent. Lily froze mid-note. Her eyes filled instantly with confusion and fear as she looked at me, her small hand sliding into mine under the table. I opened my mouth to speak, to calm things, to defend her, but Ryan was already moving. In one swift motion, he leaned across the table and slapped Lily across the face. The sound was sharp, violent, unmistakable. A crack that seemed to split the morning in half. Lily cried out, stumbling back as tears flooded her eyes. She fell against the bench, clutching her cheek, sobbing in pure shock. I felt something tear inside me. Like mother, like daughter, Ryan spat, his voice cold and venomous. Both useless. I was on my feet instantly. I grabbed Lily and pulled her into my arms, her body shaking violently as she cried into my chest. Her cheek was already red, the imprint of his hand blooming on her skin. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked around the table, desperate for someone, anyone, to intervene. Margaret sat at the end of the table. Slowly, deliberately, a smirk spread across her face. Approval. My stomach dropped. Thomas didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even look up. He stared at his plate, silent and detached, as if nothing had happened. Vanessa's face went pale. Her eyes flicked to Ryan, then away. She gripped her napkin, but stayed seated. Veronica leaned toward her husband, whispering urgently. Their children stared, wide-eyed, too shocked to speak. No one stepped in. No one told Ryan to stop. No one told Lily she was safe. And then I saw Mark. He stood a few feet away, his camera steady, the microphone still clipped to his shirt. The red recording light was on. Every second. Every word. Captured. My breath caught. Mark met my gaze. His expression was serious, controlled. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. I've got it. That moment shifted something inside me. I tightened my hold on Lily, pressing her face into my shoulder, whispering over and over, "You're safe. You're safe." But inside, my shock turned into something colder. Clearer. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't stress. This wasn't discipline. This was who Ryan had always been, enabled, protected, and never held accountable. And now, for the first time, there was proof. I stood up fully, my legs shaking but my voice steady. "We're leaving," I said. No one argued. Margaret said nothing. Thomas said nothing. Ryan didn't apologize. As I carried Lily away from the table, her sobs breaking my heart, I felt years of silence collapsing behind me. We packed in minutes. As I closed the cabin door behind us, Lily clung to me, exhausted and quiet. Her usual chatter was gone. No humming. No questions. Just shock. I buckled her into the back seat, hands trembling, and drove away without looking back. The trees blurred past. My vision burned with unshed tears. In the rearview mirror, I saw Lily staring out the window, clutching her stuffed animal, her cheek already swelling. I had failed her once, by bringing her here. I would not fail her again. That morning wasn't just the worst moment of my life. It was the moment I stopped being afraid of my family. Because fear keeps you quiet. And silence is what lets abuse survive. We didn't go far. I drove until my hands cramped and my chest ached from holding my breath. When I finally pulled into a small roadside motel, the neon sign flickered like it was barely holding on, much like me. Inside the room, I sat Lily on the bed and gently pressed a cold compress against her cheek. The red mark from Ryan's hand was still visible, angry against her pale skin. She hadn't spoken since we left the cabin. No humming. No questions. Just silence. That silence terrified me more than her crying ever could. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I trusted completely, my best friend Natalie, a family therapist who had known me since college. He hit her, I whispered as soon as she answered. Ryan hit Lily. In front of everyone. Natalie didn't gasp. She didn't panic. Her voice stayed calm, professional. Alyssa, don't wash her face, she said gently. Keep the mark visible. Take photos. You need documentation. The word documentation made everything real. I wasn't just a mother comforting her child anymore. I was a mother preparing to fight. That night, Lily finally fell asleep, curled into a tight ball, clutching her stuffed animal like a lifeline. I sat beside her, watching her chest rise and fall, my heart breaking with every breath. I made another call. This time, to Mark. We met the next morning at a quiet coffee shop a mile from the cabins. Lily stayed asleep in the car with a sitter Natalie helped arrange. Mark slid into the booth across from me, his face serious. I didn't just film yesterday, he said quietly. I've been watching Ryan for a long time. My stomach dropped. He hesitated before continuing. Last year, during a family barbecue, Ryan slapped Rachel's 9-year-old son. Hard. The boy's father stepped in, but your parents covered it up. Said it was a misunderstanding. I felt sick. Rachel had been part of Ryan's circle back then. I remembered her smile. Her silence afterward. I kept everything, Mark continued, sliding a small USB drive across the table. Footage from the cabin. Photos. Texts. And clips from last year. I stared at the drive. It felt heavy in my hand, like it carried more than data. Like it held the truth my family had buried for decades. He has a pattern, Mark said. And I won't protect him anymore. Neither would I. Natalie connected me with a lawyer that afternoon. Sandra Hale specialized in child abuse cases. Her office was small, lined with law books and quiet authority. She listened as I told the story, her pen moving steadily. This is criminal child abuse, she said plainly. We file a police report immediately. The officer assigned, Detective Evans, documented everything. Photos. Statements. The video footage. Lily's visible injury. Sandra leaned forward. You need a medical evaluation today, she said. Both physical and psychological. That afternoon, Dr. Meera Patel, a pediatric psychologist, examined Lily. She noted the bruise, the way Lily flinched at sudden noises, her sudden withdrawal. Trauma. The word crushed me. Dr. Patel's report was clinical and devastating. Physical injury. Emotional distress. Clear indicators of abuse. Back at Natalie's house, we looked deeper. Ryan's company, Vertex Labs, had a strict morality clause. No employee could engage in behavior that damaged the company's reputation, especially involving violence or minors. Natalie found an old article. A former Vertex executive had been fired for workplace harassment after a public incident. The precedent was there. This could cost him everything, Natalie said quietly. I stared at the USB drive on the table. If the prosecutor moves slowly, I said, my voice tight, I won't. Sandra had warned me over the phone. Do not post anything publicly yet, she said. It could weaken the case. But days passed. Ryan was still free. Still living comfortably. Still protected by silence. The system felt slow. Too slow. My anger simmered. Why should justice crawl? I asked Natalie one night. Why does he get time when Lily doesn't even feel safe singing anymore? Natalie was quiet for a moment. You could share the footage anonymously, she said carefully. No names. Just the act. Let people see it. Sandra sighed when I called her. It's risky, she admitted. But if done carefully, no identifying details, it's technically legal. Natalie leaned forward. I can post it from a burner account, she said. No trace to you. I looked at Lily, asleep on the couch, her face peaceful for the first time in days. I thought of my childhood. Of silence. Of all the times abuse had been excused. I took a deep breath. Do it. The next morning, the video went live. A blurred image. A child's cry. A grown man's hand striking. Subtitles read, a 7-year-old was slapped for singing at a family reunion in Yellowstone. The adults did nothing. This is child abuse. No names. No faces. Within 48 hours, it had 500,000 views. And people started connecting the dots. The internet moves fast. Faster than lawyers. Faster than denials. Faster than lies. By the third day, the anonymous video had crossed 2 million views. Comment sections exploded with outrage. Parents shared it. Teachers shared it. Child advocacy pages pinned it with warnings and hotlines. People weren't asking if it was abuse. They were asking why no one stopped it. Then came the amateur investigators. A user noticed the mountains in the background. Another matched the wood grain of the picnic table to photos online. Someone else recognized the cadence of the man's voice from a corporate keynote speech. By the end of the week, the name Ryan Whitmore was trending. Vertex Labs issued a statement within hours. Vertex Labs does not tolerate violence or abuse of any kind. We are launching an immediate internal investigation. By sunset, Ryan was placed on indefinite administrative leave. Margaret called me that night. Her voice trembled, not with concern, but with fury. You've destroyed this family, she hissed. Do you have any idea what people are saying about us? I held the phone away from my ear and laughed softly. No, I said calmly. Ryan destroyed this family when he raised his hand to a child. You just applauded. She gasped. You always were dramatic, she snapped. Children need discipline. I ended the call. That was the last time I spoke to her. The police moved faster once the public pressure hit. Detective Evans called the next morning. We are filing formal charges, he said. Assault of a minor. Endangerment. Witness intimidation based on prior reports. Prior reports. Plural. Rachel came forward. So did 2 former nannies. 1 assistant. And, finally, a former employee who had seen Ryan explode during a company retreat. Patterns are hard to ignore once silence breaks. Ryan was arrested quietly, no handcuffs on camera, no dramatic headlines. Just a booking photo leaked hours later by someone inside the precinct. His eyes were hollow. No smirk. No confidence. Vertex Labs terminated him the same day. Stock prices dipped. Board members scrambled. Shareholders demanded accountability. The morality clause did exactly what it was designed to do. Ryan lost his job. His bonuses. His board seat. His public image. But the real reckoning wasn't financial. It was isolation. Friends distanced themselves. Invitations disappeared. Even family members who had once defended him suddenly claimed they had no idea. Except I did. And so did Lily. Court proceedings were slow, but thorough. Sandra handled everything with precision. Protective orders were issued. Lily never had to see Ryan again. Dr. Patel worked with her weekly. At first, Lily barely spoke. Then one afternoon, while culling quietly at the kitchen table, she started humming. Softly. The same song. I froze. She looked up at me, nervous. Is that okay? I crossed the room in 2 steps and knelt beside her, tears blurring my vision. It's more than okay, I said, my voice breaking. It's beautiful. She smiled. That smile healed something in me I hadn't realized was still broken. Months later, the case concluded. Ryan pled guilty. No public apology. No speech. Just consequences. Probation. Mandatory anger management. A permanent record. Enough to protect future children. Enough to send a message. We moved cities. A fresh start. New school. New routines. New friends who knew Lily as the girl who loved music, not the child who had been hurt for it. On the first day of school, she stood on stage during an assembly and sang. Not loudly. Not perfectly. But bravely. I clapped until my hands hurt. Afterward, another parent approached me. She has such confidence, the woman said warmly. You must be proud. I was. But not because she sang. Because she wasn't afraid anymore. One evening, as Lily slept, I sat alone on the balcony and thought about my family. About Thomas's silence. Margaret's smirk. The years I had spent shrinking myself to keep the peace. I realized something then. Freedom doesn't come from revenge. It comes from refusing to protect people who harm others. Breaking the cycle costs you comfort. But it gives your children something better. Safety. Voice. Choice. Mark sent me one final message before we lost touch. I'm glad I didn't turn the camera off. So was I. Because the truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's caught on tape, quiet, undeniable, and finally impossible to ignore. And when silence ends, so does abuse.